bringing in his own style. My demonstrations of kata in this video were studied under Master Otsuka when he was at his mental and physical peak from his early 50s until his late 60s. I have reproduced conscientiously those kata I learned from my master at that time. After the end of the Second World War, Master Otsuka always taught us by demonstrating kata himself at the Wado Ryu headquarters. We trained very intensively with seniors from many universities who had come back from the war. Master Otsuka's technique was engraved so deeply on me that it's still with me now. We trained like crazy night and day, trying to master Master Otsuka's great technique. I set myself the task of training 10 hours every day by myself without fail. At that time, he taught me intensively all of the kata, so that even now they are part of my body. In my opinion, kata competition is not a good idea because in competition, the competitors want to get high marks, so they over-exaggerate the movement, losing the original meaning of kata. Karate kata is not a form of gymnastics. When doing kata in a competition, how many people have an opponent in mind while doing it? It is not necessary to kiai many times in one kata. Once, twice, or at most 3 times is enough. Too many is a waste. In this kata, each movement is executed independently, just using power with no combined movements. Nai Hanchi of the Wado style of karate originates from the Okinawan karate expert Matsumura of Tomari. Master Otsuka then studied this kata under Sensei Choki Motobu, who was a very famous street fighter in Okinawa. The most important aspect of Nai Hanchi is its unusual characteristic stance called Chibadachi. To fix this stance, one leg should be kneeling towards the other, and there should be enough space in between to insert one fist. Then both toes should be slightly turned in. Both knees should be pointing outwards with both thighs clenched closed. The stance resembles a horse riding stance. The same stance should be kept when either foot is lifted up in the kata or when moving to the side. The arms should always be held out at the same level, slightly lower than the shoulder. It's important to keep looking at your opponent. When Master Otsuka was at his peak, the stance of the first movement of Shinto was kokutsudachi, which I wish to keep. Main purpose of Shinto is training for good balance and smoothness of movement. The fourth movement is Gyakuzuki, where the stance is tate seishin. In the combination which starts with sagi ashi dachi, the last movement, Gyakuzuki, is in tate seishin stance. Tate seishin is also the stance when executing tate empi, which follows after the chudan block. The second, third, fourth, and fifth movements are all in tate seishin stance. The first movement is blocking a middle punch by pushing from left to right with the palm heel. In each of the second and third movements, you should slide forward. In the second movement, some people say that the left hand should be above the right hand. But this is nonsense, because the left hand bucks down on the opponent's punch, while the right hand punches the opponent. Also, after the sixth movement, in another style of ni seishi, you step to the left and execute jodan uke. But in Wado, you step forward and execute jodan uke. Towards the end of the kata, after blocking, the right hand focuses to the opponent's jaw, and the left hand focuses to the opponent's groin. Other styles are the opposite way round, but Wado Ryu is not. These defensive techniques are very traditionally Japanese because most Western countries have no custom of kneeling. Most of these movements are drawn from one of the Japanese martial arts called Shindo Yoshin-ryu Jiu-Jitsu, which Master Otsuka studied in depth. In this technique, the most important point is the hand movement. Especially note the left hand. When you catch the attacker's right hand, you roll his hand in and pull it to the side of your hip. Another important point is how the legs change from the first movement to the second, and the hip twist. When the attacker seizes the defender's neck with crossed arms, the defender must choose exactly the right time to defend. That is, just before the attacker can focus the strangle. It is too late to defend after the strangle has been focused. As in number 1 of the most important points is the change of leg position and hip twisting. When the punch is coming to your face in the first movement, move your body to the right. When throwing your opponent in the second movement, push your head toward your opponent's body and hit him with your whole body. This enables you to throw your opponent easily. When you are pulling your opponent down, don't just use your hand. Instead, twist your body to the right and use your whole body to pull your opponent down. The major point of this jiu-jitsu throwing technique is called kote nage. When throwing your opponent, first pull up his body and then pull it down. You must always keep the right stance and your back straight. Otherwise, you will lose balance and be unable to throw properly. Also note that when throwing, you should keep close to your opponent's body. These techniques consist of basic smooth movements peculiar to the Wado style. I have added a few techniques of my own, but for the most part, they are basically the same. When fighting with a knife, you should always bear in mind that your opponent's reach is increased by a knife length. If you make the same movement when blocking a knife as when blocking a punch, you may get stabbed or cut. Your body must move back further than for a punch. Be careful not to cut yourself when you are trying to catch your opponent's hand or to throw him. The attacker takes you by surprise, feinting with the right hand and stabbing underneath with the left. When you block the knife attack, you should move your hip back more than for a punch. Also, when you make a maegeri to your opponent, you should move the knife to the side. Otherwise, you might get stabbed in the leg. Timing is most important. When your opponent steps forward, you should sweep his front foot before his weight is shifted on it. This throwing technique is from judo. When you block the knife with your left hand, move your other arm back far enough to prevent the knife from stabbing you. During this first blocking movement, ensure that your body is far back enough and twist it more than in a normal block. When twisting the opponent's arm, an important point to note is the use of the bone at the right side of your left wrist. You pull his arm down with the right hand and up with the left, and when taking hold of your own throat with your left hand, you should make a grip as high as possible. In this throwing technique, kote ngaeshi, the important point is hip twisting. When throwing, the defender seizes the attacker's right arm and twists his hip to the right so that the attacker cannot escape. The essence of these defenses is timing. Before your opponent brings his arm down to stab you, counterattack by hitting his jaw with your left palm heel. As the attacker starts to bring his arm down to stab you, defend with good timing by doing Jodan Uke straight up to the underside of the upper part of the attacker's arm. If your timing is too late, you'll be in danger of being stabbed. When blocking, slide your front left foot forward and move your right foot to the left side, twisting your body to the right. This should ensure your safety even if you haven't blocked properly. In the first movement, the most important thing is again timing. When attacking both the front and the back of the attacker's body with your palm heels, your left foot should step forward to the back of his body. The point of this technique is to take your body out of range of the knife attack in line with the knife movement. Move your left hand down onto the attacker's wrist. One of the important points of free fighting is reading as soon as possible what your opponent's favorite technique is, so that you can perform an appropriate counterattack. However, if your techniques are done with bad timing, you'll have no success. During free fighting, always keep in mind the 3 patterns of Sen. Another important point is that if you wish to have a favorite technique, you should constantly practice it. In the beginning, most techniques are difficult to master, but don't despair. One of Wado Ryu's most characteristic and popular techniques is Suzuki, which nowadays is very useful in competition. Attack is the best form of defense. When facing an opponent, there are three patterns of attack initiative. In this situation, both you and your opponents are ready and willing to attack. Your attack must be made first in a split second between the time your opponent mentally commits to the attack and the moment he begins his actual movement. His commitment to attack will prevent him from responding with a defense. In Sen, you and your opponent begin to move simultaneously, which would seemingly result in I-uji. Your awareness of his intentions to attack allows you to attack just slightly faster, making your foot before his. You must remain calm and watch your opponent very carefully. Your block should be an automatic response to his attack, and you should attack him before he is able to recover from his initial movement.